This Chicago Bears defense was very good at the end of last season, but they want to be great in 2024, and they know exactly what they need to do to get to that level.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lauren Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1. You can follow the podcast at Locked On Bears on all of your favorite social media platforms, including the Locked On Bears YouTube channel, where you can keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. On the show today, we'll hear from some key leaders on this Chicago Bears defense about where this defense is right now and how they're looking to take this next step this year. We'll first hear from Tremaine Edmunds about how good they felt last season and how much they've been able to learn from that to apply for this season. Now with so many players back together with that experience under their belt to take another step forward this year. Then we'll hear from Keenan Allen, not a leader of the defense, but a leader of the offense, about what he's seeing from the defense that he's practicing against now for the first time and how he says they're annoying to practice against, but that's a good thing. And then we'll hear from Matt Eberflus about how Jaylen Johnson really sets the example for the rest of this defense, not only in terms of what he does on the field now, but what he's done over the course of his career to get to this point. There's no doubt this Chicago Bears defense finished last season strong. They were playing some of their best football down the stretch, but they started last season poorly. And overall, that balances out to not being like a statistically wasn't like a statistically overly impressive defense. They were 20th in points allowed and 12th in yards allowed. Of course, they were a top 5 run defense in terms of yards per carry and total yards. They were number 1, but the pass defense was a bit lower on the statistical rankings. But we obviously saw they played at a higher level than what ended up being the 20th ranked defense in terms of scoring over the course of last season. So it's kind of clear then where the pathway is to go from good last season, which is how Tremaine Edmunds characterized them, to great this season, which is how Tremaine Edmunds is hoping to see them go as they try and take that next step.
Tremaine, when you look at this defense as a whole, obviously you haven't had a lot of chances spring to put it together a whole, but you're in a system that you guys have been in for a while. You've got a starting unit that's been together for a little bit. What do you sense coming together with the consistency and the familiarity of the system and everything that comes with that?
Yeah, I think guys just taking, the experience that we had last year and, just learning off of it. I think the greatest thing moving forward is making mistakes before. And we can learn from those mistakes. If you could talk about it and hold each other accountable. I've been a part of good defenses, and, last year was a good defense. Even though we had a lot of ups and downs, it was a good defense. You know what I mean? We had a lot of good guys, a lot of guys making plays. And, anytime we can come back to the meeting room, come off the practice field, and hold each other accountable, that's what you want to see. And, that's what it's about now. Just building off what we did last year, building off the good things, building off the things that we know we can get better with, because a lot of areas we still can grow. And that's what you love it. That's what you love about the game. It's the process, man. You know what I mean? It's a journey, not a destination. And then we taking every step of the way. We putting it into our belt, man, and using that as the season come along.
You characterize it as a good defense. What has to happen to make it a great defense or an elite?
Say it one more time.
You characterize the defense as being good last year.
Right.
What would it take to make it a great defense or an elite defense? Like what has to happen specifically?
Yeah, I think. What we play this game for a win, be dominant. I mean, we was dominant at times, but I'm talking about from start to finish. Obviously coming off, just getting to a hot start, starting fast and, not waiting. And, I think that's the work we're putting in now. We got it at our advantage right now, taking it one day at a time. Understand it's going to be ups and downs, man. That's the league. You know what I mean? Everybody goes through that, but those are the times that make you who you are. And that's what we're building on right now.
So I think Tremaine Edmunds characterized the defensive approach very well there. That they're not denying the good that they did last season, but they're also not resting on that and saying, oh yeah, that was good enough. We'll just need to repeat that exactly and then we'll be good. Because no, I mean, there's always room to keep improving there. But I think it's worth remembering like just how many new pieces and moving parts there were involved in this Bears defense last season. And let's not overlook the fact that they lost their defensive coordinator after like 1 or 2 games. And then, of course, Phil Snow gets brought in as a senior defensive analyst at some point, but Matt Eberflus takes back over like the main defensive coordinating roles. So like there was all that at the very top, but even like entering the season, right? Tremaine Edmunds and TJ Edwards both brought in as free agents, newcomers at the linebacker position. You've got a rookie cornerback starting on the outside, and your main replacement off the bench, your fourth cornerback who occasionally played, Terrell Smith, also a rookie off of the bench. Plus your defensive line has a brand new DeMarcus Walker, a brand new Andrew Billings, a brand new Yannick Ngakoue. Again, midseason they trade for Montez Sweat. So, 3 out of your 4 defensive line starters were brand new players, plus a rookie Gervon Dexter and Zach Pickens rotating in there. So Justin Jones was really your only like returning steady from the previous season defensive lineman, brand new linebackers, a brand new cornerback. Of course, the secondary had all had a year together, but Brisker and Kyler Gordon were just in year 2. So like this was so many new players and players all getting together and players trying to learn this defense that you can understand why it took them some time for everything to kind of settle in a little bit and be better down the stretch in the second half of the season. And you could understand then why, as they all come back together for OTAs and now mandatory minicamp with most of the same starting lineup intact, you have a new safety, Kevin Byard, replacing Eddie Jackson, but your other 11 guys were all players that were here last season. Some of the defensive linemen in bigger roles, but all other players that were on the roster in this system with this defense, that they can all feel like, okay, we've learned from some of those ups and downs from last season. We've been able to grow as a result of that. And now that we've sort of reached this baseline comfort and chemistry, let's see if we can really perfect that and take it to the next level when it comes to things like the consistency that Tremaine Edmunds talked about there, and being able to dominate from start to finish, right? Not just have good moments or good games against some teams, but really be consistently strong against all teams and not have some early struggles along the way, especially to kind of help Caleb Williams in his early games. Or the more the defense can hold up that consistency, the better this whole team is going to be and the easier it's going to be for Caleb Williams to bring this offense along at a pace that's going to be most comfortable for him. Already, this Bears offense is getting to experience the strength of this defense. A lot of newcomers on offense that are going through some of this learning process, and the defense is not making it easy on them, but I think that can be a good thing this time of year as the offense gets tested from the very start and doesn't get a lot of like easy going light days at practice, but they're messing with the beast right away. So we'll hear from Keenan Allen about his experience now getting to go against this defense for the first time and how that's shaping what the offense does on the other side of the ball next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is sponsored by BetterHelp. BetterHelp provides online therapy that's here to help you be your best self. Online therapy is a really important part of my own personal mental health regimen, and it's why I can't recommend BetterHelp enough. I go to therapy because I want my brain to be its healthiest and its strongest. I always say it's like going to the gym for my body. I don't go to the gym because my body is broken, but because I want it to be strong and healthy. And I don't go to therapy because my brain is broken, but because I want my mental health at its best. I want my brain to be its strongest, and I want to be able to be my best self. And BetterHelp is a great way to be able to do that. Therapy is different for everybody. A lot of us have bigger problems than just what's going on with our favorite sports team. So it's important to get things off your chest every once in a while. If you've been thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be flexible and suited to your schedule. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. This Bears defense has been sharp quickly during off-season practices, and this Bears offense has not, and that's pretty normal when you have a very experienced, familiar defense and you have a young, new, put-together offense with some turnover at key positions, quarterback, running back, wide receiver, center, maybe even right guard, depending on how that situation plays out. We talked about that yesterday on the podcast. And I'll say right now, I can feel a sneeze coming on. So if I sneeze mid-sentence at some point, I will hope that you forgive me and we'll keep talking through it. But I can feel it in the back of my nose. So I'm going to keep powering through. But it's tingling and it's coming at some point in the podcast. But the point being, yeah, we should expect this Bears offense to be behind a little bit. And we should expect this Bears defense to test them a little bit. And while you wouldn't want the defense to completely smother the offense every practice to the point where the offense can't get anything done, and that has not been the case, it is good that this defense can test them right away and can say, hey, this is what it's going to be like when you play some of the better defenses on your schedule. Not every defense is going to be a cakewalk. Not every defense is going to let you score 35 points easily or anything like that. So get your reps in now so that when you practice against this defense and then you go against some of the defenses on your schedule, the real defenses will be a little bit easier than the defense that you've got going up against you in practice every week. And so Keenan Allen, being a veteran, new to the team, but a veteran in the league, is new to practicing against this Bears defense. And already he's feeling some of that, I don't know if frustration is the right word. It's kind of a friendly frustration. Certainly he's feeling the level of competition and the way that this defense is testing this Bears offense.
Today was your first day getting a look, kind of live look at the defense. What do you think about just how they fly around, the energy, how they talk, just their overall demeanor?
It looked like a top 5 defense. They sound like a top 5 defense too. Defenses are annoying, especially at practice. You just hear them every time they make a play. It's hoorah, celebration. It's guys running up and down the sideline. So, it's annoying. The offense, we get a first down. One guy just trots around, comes back to the huddle. Everybody's like, okay, what's the next play? You don't really see too much. Yeah! You don't get all that just because, somebody did a rip through and, got back to the quarterback. So, it is what it is. But, their energy, the way they communicate, the way they get lined up, definitely high class.
I think Keenan does a good job of illustrating the advantage that comes with this Bears defense knowing each other so well and having so many of these guys having already played together. There's not a lot of catching up or bonding that they still have to do, so that when somebody makes a great play, like that's already their guy. It's already their boy. It's already somebody that they're super familiar with and have spent a lot of time with, and it's easy to find that energy naturally, just be excited and react and have fun with it and hype it up and celebrate and be loud. And that's some of that is just the natural personality of the players on the defense versus the players in the offense. I think we know Jaylen Johnson and Tyreek Stevenson and Kevin Byard and these kind of guys, like they're just guys who generally make noise and bring some energy on defense. That's just part of their personalities. Whereas maybe a few guys on offense, DJ Moore's a little bit on the quieter side and Braxton Jones a little on the quieter side. Cole Kmet has some energy, but some of the guys in the offense that's just their natural disposition, and that's fine. But the defense is really able to sort of connect and bring that out. Whereas, on offense, if DeAndre Swift makes a play, you're going to be excited for him, but it's not quite as natural when it's not like a guy that you really, really know well, right? It's like being excited with out with your friends, having a good time versus I don't want to say a stranger you just met at the bar, but a friend versus an acquaintance, right? It's okay, or a coworker versus a friend, right? You're excited for the coworker, but it's a little different when that coworker is actually your best friend or one of your closest friends. I feel like in any workplace, right? You got coworkers that you're really close to, and you got coworkers that you respect and you work with and you get along with, but you don't get hyped up for them the same way of the coworkers that you're really close with. And I feel like this defense is that group of coworkers that are really close, and this offense is still building those bonds. They like each other, they get along with each other, they respect each other, they recognize the talent that each other has. But until you're really you're boys with that coworker, you don't have the natural instinctual reaction of energy and celebration. And I'm hoping that as this Bears offense builds more of that chemistry and gets more time together, more reps together, all of those things, that the energy starts to follow with it. Because I do think playing well and performing well also naturally creates that energy and those bonds too of yes, when every time Caleb throws a great pass to a receiver, you feel that connection, that literal connection of personality and attachment of like, oh, right, like I trust this guy more. Like we get it. Like we were both on the same page there, and you build a closeness that way. And same thing with the offense as a whole. Like when a big play goes off and everyone feels like, oh man, I did my 1/11th on that play, and everyone recognizes, yes, we couldn't have had that big running play, that big passing play if the offensive line didn't do their jobs, if the routes weren't in the right spots, or if the blocking, whatever it had to be after the catch. Like everyone starts to recognize the contributions of their teammates towards the big success that they all have, and it brings them closer together, and then they're able to celebrate in that same way and have that kind of energy like Keenan Allen was talking about in that clip. So that's where it feels like the offense can still get there. It's just going to take time, and it's natural that the defense should be a step ahead in that regard, but that's also how the defense goes about taking this step forward from good to great, that they were trying to find that last season, and they found it, certainly down the stretch, but maybe earlier on, it wasn't quite as natural there. And it didn't quite click in all the same ways, but it really did down the stretch, and you hope this Bears offense can get there too once things get rolling down the stretch. But something that Allen talked about at the end there that not necessarily slipped through the cracks, but it might not have been as noticed. Like he talked about how they communicate and how they line up, right? That's not just the celebration, right? But like it's energy, how they communicate and how they line up. Like having everything be sharp. Everybody knows where they're supposed to go, when they're supposed to be there, how they're supposed to play it. Whereas the offense is still working on learning the play calls and where they're supposed to line up and how to translate, okay, this word means this route or this word means this protection and how all that fits together. Like it's going to be a slower process for that side of this ball, but the defense is raring to go. And they're certainly led by Jaylen Johnson being not only the highest paid player on the defense, but really emerging in that leadership role on the back end. Like Kevin Byard is too, but we know Jaylen Johnson is the top dog on this defense. And I think for the coaching staff, for Matt Eberflus, for new defensive coordinator Eric Washington, like Jaylen Johnson sets the tone, sets the mold. Like, and the Bears paying him the way he did with this big contract also fulfills that example-setting mold of like, hey, everyone on the roster, look to Jaylen Johnson as the guy that you should model. Not just your game after, because you might not be a cornerback, but model your career after. Like, handle your approach to this game and this job the way he does. And I thought Matt Eberflus did a good job of illustrating what that looks like and why that's so valuable to the defense. So we'll hear from Coach on their number one cornerback and his growth process from very talented player to elite, highly paid cornerback on this defense next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by our friends at Gametime, the best way to get tickets for all of your favorite live events. I use Gametime all the time. I've actually got tickets to see T-Pain in concert coming up here, and I got my tickets through the Gametime app on my phone. So whether you're talking concerts like that, or comedy shows, theater shows, or your favorite sporting events, Bears games, if you want to go see any of the games on their schedule, you can get tickets at Gametime, and it's a great ticket buying experience because you can see your view from your seat, so you know exactly what you're going to get, and they have all-in pricing. So you know exactly how much you're going to pay on the front end. You don't get to your cart and get to check out and discover, wait a minute, where are all these fees coming from? Now the tickets cost way more than I thought. Nope. You knew exactly what you're getting on the front end. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem our code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. You're always going to get the lowest price with Gametime, and you're always going to get more sports talk here on the Locked On Podcast Network. So if you're looking for another listen after Locked On Bears today, don't forget to check out our Locked On Sports Today 24/7 live stream, bringing you the biggest stories from across sports with all of our Locked On Podcast Network experts. It's streaming 24 hours on the Locked On Sports Today YouTube channel or our free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And every day, Jaylen Johnson has been the example setter, the tone setter for this Chicago Bears defense as the guy that the organization can point to and say, here's a player who is extremely talented. And we brought him in and we helped him go from a very good second-round pick to an elite cornerback who we then rewarded with a market-setting, top-of-the-line deal to say, yes, you've done everything we wanted you to. You've worked with us. You've gone through the ups and downs. You've proved to us that you are a great player, and here is your big contract. So that every other player can see that, oh, if I'm talented, which, they should believe that they are, and I work hard and do all the things and trust the process and go through what the coaches tell me and keep working to improve my game, I too can not only become an elite player at my position, but also the Chicago Bears have shown they will then reward that elite play with a significant market-setting contract. That they're not afraid to pay players who are good, who become good, and set that kind of example for what the Chicago Bears want. And there was some reporting in The Athletic from, I think, Dan Pompei, if I'm hopefully citing it correctly. He did a big story on Jaylen Johnson's growth and how, early on, Jaylen Johnson and Matt Eberflus did not get along super well. It was not something that was super publicly known, but Eberflus challenged Jaylen Johnson a lot in practice. And at one point, they didn't bench Jaylen Johnson, but moved him to the second team and had him working with the backups for a couple days to get him to try a little bit harder and focus on the hits principle and the hustle and the intensity and stuff. And it made Jaylen mad. And they didn't get along well. And eventually they kind of had to bury the hatchet there and patch things up. But it certainly motivated him to play well, and it worked. It could have blown up, but it absolutely worked. And so I think knowing that context of hey, there used to be a rockier relationship with Eberflus and Jaylen Johnson, these quotes from Matt Eberflus, I think, hit a little bit stronger or just resonate a little bit more when you hear him talk about the growth of Jaylen Johnson, knowing that it was rocky between the two of them at one point.
Jaylen Johnson, how did he go from a player where I'm sure before you even walked in the door, you could see the talent? How did he go from talent to someone that you could trust to be a pillar of your defense?
Discipline and daily work habits. That's what he's done. And he showed that he had an area he needed to work on, and he got better at it. So he showed determination, and then he really showed his devotion and love for the game to me. And that's what he did. So determination, discipline, and devotion, that's what he showed.
When you're in a contract year and guys do that, some guys go the other way, which is they just kind of can't handle the pressure that comes with it. What does that say about Jaylen that he did it when the chips were down?
Yeah, just clutch, right? Clutch and consistency, that's what he is.
See, I think in a vacuum, those things Matt Eberflus said could just sound like purely cliches and generic, kind of yes, of course, okay, discipline, getting better at the areas he needed to get better at, and determination. Sure, you say that for every player, right? Every player should be disciplined and determined and get better in areas, but not every player that does that becomes as good as Jaylen Johnson has. But when you apply that to the context of, Jaylen didn't like that at first. That the discipline was, I don't want to say that he was lacking in discipline, because I think he was still a disciplined guy, but specifically areas of improvements that he got better. It sounded like maybe Matt Eberflus was pushing him on those areas of improvement, and not that Jaylen Johnson didn't think he needed to get better, but maybe the ways that the coaching staff was pushing him in those areas weren't exactly what he wanted to hear or how he wanted to hear it, but being disciplined and determined about it. And then really it wraps up with devotion and love for the game. That feels like something that Eberflus really tried to squeeze out of him. Again, not saying that Jaylen Johnson didn't love the game before, but you really have to love the game at another level to hustle at the level that the Bears coaching staff asks of these players, to run to the ball on every play, even when the play is away from you. It's very easy to say you're a little bit tired at practice and you're on one side of the field and the ball is thrown to the other side of the field, and then just kind of walk it and jog it because there are 10 other players between you and the ball, and you're never going to be the one that actually gets to the ball. So all right, who cares if I just kind of jog for this one because the play's never going to come to me anyway. But to enforce that on tape, and to then go to practice and say, sorry, you weren't hustling enough on those plays. You're playing with the second string today. And to build into your players that, no, okay, we're hustling on every single play. We are working our butts off at all times. You have to really love the game to dedicate yourself that much, to push yourself to be involved in plays in when you otherwise wouldn't be involved. And to be able to build then consistency in that through the discipline, through the determination, because of the love of the game. Like, that's what Matt Eberflus is here to instill in their players. And that's where I think, knowing the context of Jaylen Johnson, maybe not loving exactly how that was handled early on, adds more to Matt Eberflus's comments than just, again, okay, discipline, determination, devotion are kind of, yeah, they all start with D and the alliteration's nice, but it's a little bit generic. It's a little bit like duh, like every NFL, you think every NFL player has determination, discipline, and devotion, but like it's dialed up a little bit more when it comes to Jaylen Johnson. You can't help but wonder if that helped him take his game to a slightly higher level, as opposed to like, had the coach not been Eberflus and had not pushed Jaylen Johnson in that way, you know, are they still squeezing as much out of him? You know, is a different coach getting 100% out of Jaylen Johnson or 90% out of Jaylen Johnson? And maybe 90% of Jaylen Johnson is still a very good player, but like, what kind of a difference does that extra 10% make? Like, is that what puts him in position to get this massive contract and to be this number one cornerback for the Bears, as opposed to just a very talented cornerback that he was coming out of college, but really kind of reach that next level? And you wonder how that applies to other players. I mean, we're already seeing Montez Sweat having to ramp up a little bit when it comes to like conditioning and stuff. This is his first offseason with the Bears, and maybe the expectations are a little higher, a little different in Chicago than what it was for him in Washington. And not that he's upset about it or disagreeing with it, but just maybe it's pushing him another level. And maybe that's a way to get a little more out of him even than we've already seen, which has already been very impressive. Like can they squeeze that extra 5 to 10% out of a bunch of different players that we wouldn't really know otherwise if they weren't getting that squeeze out of them, because we've only ever seen them get squeezed out of them with Matt Eberflus. But that's just kind of the context that I think is worth keeping an eye on with all of these players as we track their development. It's not that Eberflus has this magic formula to unlocking the potential of every talented young player that comes through his door, but it seemed to work with Jaylen Johnson, and that's been a win-win for absolutely everyone involved. So it was nice to hear Matt Eberflus kind of reflect on what that looked like for one of the really key players on this defense as they look to go from good to great this season. Jaylen Johnson has to be a huge part of that. We'll keep tabs on how this defense does throughout OTAs and then into training camp later on this summer. Certainly any big offensive updates, you can be sure we'll break it down for you right here on the Locked On Bears podcast as well. So make sure then that you hit that subscribe button right now on the Locked On Bears YouTube channel or wherever you're listening to the podcast version, because that's going to be the best way to keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'll keep up with the biggest updates coming out of minicamp. We're also going to talk about these Bears receivers. Certainly the wide receiver market with Justin Jefferson's big contract impacting the short and long-term futures of Keenan Allen and Rome Odunze. So we'll get into that in coming days here on the podcast and a whole lot more. We're not going anywhere this offseason. So we'll always make sure that even in the slow month of June and July, really, that you're still going to have an opportunity to bear down.